learning Selenium with Java, then you don't need to learn the entire Java language. Let's understand the most important Java concepts you actually need for Selenium automation step by step. So let's start with the basics. First, we have variables and data types. A variable is simply used to store a value, and the data type tells Java what kind of value we are storing. For example, we can use int for numbers, string for text, and boolean for true or false values. In Selenium, we use variables to store things like URLs, browser names, page titles, test data, and even the WebDriver object. Now let's move to conditional statements. These are used when our program needs to make a decision. The most common example is if else. For example, we can check whether an element is displayed and perform an action based on the result. Next, we have loops. Loops are used when we want to repeat an action multiple times. For example, if a page has multiple elements and we want to perform the same operation on each element, we can use a loop instead of writing the same code again and again. Now coming to methods. A method is a reusable block of code that performs a specific task. In Selenium, instead of writing login steps in every test case, we can create a login method and simply call it whenever required. This makes our automation code cleaner and reusable. Next, we have arrays. Arrays allow us to store multiple values of the same type. They can be useful for storing test data, browser names, URLs, or expected values. And then we have strings. Strings are used for handling text, and you'll use them a lot in Selenium. For example, driver.getTitle returns the title as a string, which we can then compare or validate. Now let's move into OOP concepts because these are extremely important for Selenium frameworks. First, classes and objects. A class is like a blueprint, and an object is an instance of that class. In page object model, we commonly create classes for different web pages and then create objects to use their methods. Next are constructors. A constructor is used when an object is created and is commonly used to initialize the object. In a Selenium page object model, constructors are often used to initialize the WebDriver. Now let's talk about inheritance. Inheritance allows a child class to reuse accessible methods and properties from a parent class. For example, we can create a base test class with common setup and teardown methods and extend it in our test classes. This helps reduce duplicate code. Moving ahead, we have encapsulation. Encapsulation means keeping data and related methods together while controlling direct access to the internal data. For example, in page object model, we can keep locators private and expose methods like click login or enter username. Next is polymorphism, which means many forms. One common Selenium example is WebDriver driver equals new Chrome driver. WebDriver is the reference type, while Chrome driver is the actual object. This gives our framework flexibility. Now coming to abstraction. Abstraction means hiding unnecessary implementation details and exposing only what is required. For example, when we call a login method, our test case doesn't need to know every Selenium command written inside that method. It simply uses the functionality. Next, we have interfaces. An interface defines a contract that implementing classes can follow. Selenium's WebDriver is a very good example of an interface, with browser-specific classes such as Chrome driver providing the implementation. Now let's understand method overloading. Overloading means having methods with the same name but different parameters. This allows us to use the same method name for slightly different requirements. And finally, we have method overriding. Overriding happens when a child class provides its own implementation of a method inherited from the parent class. We commonly use the @override annotation for this. So these are the important Java concepts you should focus on if you're learning Selenium with Java. You don't have to master every single Java topic before starting Selenium. First make these concepts strong, then start applying them while creating your Selenium framework.